one of my favorite scenes of an interaction with a couple is whenever he gets home and his wife Carla Jean starts questioning him. Where'd you get that gun from the getting place? What'd you give for it? I didn't give nothing for it. I found it.
It's great. It's so good.
So you know that line, like she keeps asking him questions and he's like, keep on, I'm gonna take you in the back and screw you. I tried that line on my wife once, and
how'd that go?
One, two, three, four. Shelf Destruct.
Do y'all remember what this mug is from?
I do.
You have to put it in the frame so I can see it.
Pull it a little bit in.
Oh, Dave and Buster's. That is my bachelor party.
Mm-hmm.
Correct? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you listening and not watching, that was for my bachelor party before I got married. We decided to rage super hard, and we went to Dave and Buster's and drank like 2 beers and played skee ball and House of the Dead, and we all had enough tickets to buy a mug. Which is pretty on brand.
Yeah. I have to say, unfortunately, I think my mug got smashed at some point. But so did we for your bachelor party. So it goes full circle.
Enough.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you guys.
Yeah, man.
A little bit of a
Likewise.
break.
I'm actually glad to see your face, Taylor. You've had quite the week.
Yes. So sorry for the delay, everyone. We intended to not have that much of a break for the new year, holidays and all that. So we, if you've been watching the news, I live in Nashville, and we got pretty hard hit by the ice storm / snowstorm. It was more of an ice storm than a snowstorm. We had a little bit of snow, but the ice is what shut everything down. So I lost power for about a week and ended up, we tried to tough it out in the house. It was about like 30 something degrees. You could see your breath in my house. And I panic bought a generator. I had the space heaters going. I was cooking over a charcoal grill, which was fun for about 24 and a half hours. And we just couldn't do it anymore. It was like, we also have cats, and they were miserable, and they didn't want to eat because they were so cold. And so we found an Airbnb. It was fine. It really wasn't like the end of the world or anything. But not having power, I didn't have all my equipment for the podcast, and so we just decided to push it until we could get back in our respective homes. You guys had a little bit of power outages, didn't you, in Georgia?
Yeah, just a little. It wasn't too bad.
I was amazed personally because I live in a really old neighborhood, and all the power lines are above ground, and they're all surrounded by really old trees. So if it becomes a light drizzle, there's like a 50% chance that I will lose power. And so I lose power 3 to 4 times a year. And last time we had a winter storm in Atlanta, I lost power for 36 hours, and I can't remember if it was on this show or if it was on me and Will's soccer podcast, but like I was talking about like how depressing and lonely it was to like be alone in the house with no power. And so I had geared up and expected that I bought a bunch of food that I could cook over charcoal or whatever, and bought like batteries and everything, and was ready to just like hold up in our bedroom with the cats and dogs all in one room. And the power went out for 15 minutes and then was back on and didn't have another issue the whole time.
Yeah, that's perfect.
It was fantastic.
That's just enough time to get the charcoals going outside so that you can like make some hot dogs and then watch a movie.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about like ice storms, and in a way I kind of think fondly on the days of the pandemic. This is a
Here we go.
No, but like just this like utter mystery about what's going to happen next. There's something really exciting about that. The pandemic had a lot of that. Clearly, we all were living in this a tunnel.
There is a little bit of a break in like the mundanity of your day to day, right? Like when, you know, in this kind of stage of life where, you know, we go to our jobs 5 days a week and we kind of have a schedule and we go to the gym on Tuesday and what, you know, it is kind of, there a little bit of excitement in a break in the routine can be nice, but it got old pretty quick.
Yeah. For what it's worth, Taylor, I know we had texted, we're like, hey, we're recording tonight, right? And you're like, literally, my house is frozen over. And I sent a screenshot of our text to my parents, and they were very concerned about you. So just know that, just know that
it was fine.
Yeah, Kim and Dean were ready to drive up there and save you. So
no, it was okay. It was like, you know, similar to Jensen. Like I live in an old neighborhood. Most of our neighborhood is built up around this old DuPont plant. That I think most of the building was done like around World War I when they were manufacturing stuff for the war, if I'm not incorrect. And so all the houses are like Sears kit homes from literally like the 19 teens and 20s. Like I think my house was built in like when I bought it was like 100 years old when I bought it. So it was like around 1918, 1920, something like that. And so similarly, the infrastructure is kind of old and is built around trees that probably weren't there when the infrastructure was put there. So yeah, like a slight breeze will knock out power for our block occasionally. But you know, all told, for me, it was fine. We were able to go someplace that had power. But, you know, funny enough, like our neighborhood ended up on the local news because there was like this big controversy between this one tree that had fallen on the power lines and then fallen on a house. So basically the power company has all this liability around what they will actually trim because they don't want to trim stuff that's right over a house because then there's all this liability if they were to drop something on the house, blah, blah, blah. And so there was like 3 days where the neighborhood like Facebook group was just like all going on about this tree and whose responsibility it was to take it down. And it was too big for like us neighborhood people to get out there and take care of it. You needed like a bucket truck. It was like a real actual thing, but they ended up sending down the news. And they, you know, talked in front of it about, you know, it had knocked out power for, you know, a couple hundred people or whatever. But it's all good now. But that is our excuse for why we had a bit of a break in between our Christmas episode and this one. But glad that you're joining us and glad to hang out with you guys and talk about No Country for Old Men. I've read this before, and I think all of us had seen the film adaptation as well prior to reading it, but general impressions, what y'all think about the book?
It was great. I love Cormac McCarthy. And this, I feel like I'm finally getting to the point where I've read just enough books where I can tell differences like as authors progress. And you can really tell that this is a later book, and some of the other stuff that I've read are earlier books of his. But I kept getting the impression, because of the way it was written, that he fully intended to like sell the film rights because of the way the book was constructed.
In fact, I think that he actually he was originally writing it as a screenplay and then turned it into a novel. So yeah, you're right on, I think.
Well, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, completely agree. You jump right in and you immediately start seeing the scenes play out like behind a camera, 100%. One of the things I think that it's really telling, and this is very McCarthy, but like 65% of it was dialogue, you know? Like there's like he tells, you know, the story is told between two people talking, like, you know, the scene and the movement and like, you know, how it progresses and what they see and everything. It's incredible. It's just like a really interesting writing style. And I think that was very telling of just his style and this book in particular, and what he wanted to kind of portray in the book. But I mean, one of the things I think that I took away from this book, was how faithful the film adaptation was, and just how great it was, which I know we'll talk about in a little bit. But B, I don't know if I've read a character as like more intense or who just builds more dread than Anton Chigurh. Like, he is an absolute, like, totally
menacing figure. Yeah.
Menacing figure. And there's no stopping him. It's just an absolute train. And I had actually forgotten, and I don't, obviously we'll get to the end, but how it ends. And like, I sort of in my brain, I was like, okay, eventually things are going to like come to a head, but intentionally they don't. And, I think that was one of the most kind of like eye-opening things for me. I was like, oh yeah, okay, I remember that now. So
yeah, this is a bit of an oversimplification, but you can kind of think of McCarthy, and I'm not a McCarthy completionist. I haven't read every single one of his books yet. I've kind of been like savoring them. Like, they'll sit on the shelf. Like, I'm gonna read this one. I know I'm gonna read it. I don't want to read all of them yet because unfortunately he passed away a couple of years ago, and so what we have is what we're gonna get. And it's like, I want to savor them because each one that I read, I end up loving. But I have read the majority of his books, and you can almost think of his two periods. And again, this is definitely an oversimplification, but it can kind of help you think about how his writing style shifts a bit in this era that we're reading. Like, the first era can almost be like almost a Faulknerian era, where his like Blood Meridian would fall into that category. It's the language is, his prose is a lot more flowery. He describes things in very grandiose terms, kind of like Faulkner or Herman Melville type, just very beautiful descriptions. Of course, sparse dialogue like he always does. He also doesn't really use punctuation almost ever, really, like especially when it comes to like quotation marks and even commas and stuff like that. You'll see periods and stuff at the end of sentences, but you don't really see like the delineation between dialogue and description. So for me, like, it takes a quick second, I think, to like start figuring out what he's doing. But this era, like probably starting, in the 90s and then onward into the end of his life, is almost more of like a Hemingway era in a way, where it's really terse dialogue sentences, still really great descriptions of things, but he kind of pares down his descriptions a bit, and just I feel like his descriptions are a little bit less biblical, maybe, is a way to think about it. Like, I feel like when I read Blood Meridian, there's almost like an Old Testament feel to some of what he's doing, which is very, very interesting. This is just a juxtaposition to that in a way, particularly this book and The Road, which is the novel that follows this one, not as a sequel, but just like it sequentially. And even in his final works, like The Passenger, they're a little bit more in that vein too. But what strikes me about it too, beyond the lack of punctuation and the characterizations and stuff that Will and Jensen kind of mentioned, is I've attempted writing fiction before. Just like anybody that likes to read probably has. Like, I had a creative writing class that I took a couple semesters ago before I finished my degree, and I was, just like interested in trying to do it. It is so hard to write dialogue. It is so hard. It's like infamously difficult to write really good dialogue. And when I read his dialogue, I just want to like throw the book sometimes, because it's like so perfect. A lot of it, like,
yeah.
I just feel like, particularly, even when he's writing in like dialect, like a lot of these people speak in kind of like a southwestern Texas, kind of a Texas accent almost, it still feels really believable and real, and not like a caricature. It's just a testament to a really master writer, that he's able to have written something Melville Faulkner-esque like Blood Meridian, and then also something that's more Hemingway-esque in this book. It was just an absolute genius.
I wanted to just click on something you said a little bit and just talk about the lack of like quotation marks in his dialogue. So in the ad world, hopefully I'm not like mixing up my Mad Men here, but like David Ogilvy, you know, he's like an advertising legend. He was always like anti-periods in headlines because he always thought like if you put a period at the end of a headline in an ad, it would essentially stop the reader from moving on to like the subtext and the important stuff that you want them to read to like get more of that emotional draw, right? The headline draws them in, and then what they read underneath that is basically what sells it. Right. So, knowing that context, I started reading, and this is probably the wrong way to do it, but I was reading that thinking, okay, in a way, like when you add quotation marks, those like visual bookends to dialogue on each line of dialogue, does that stop you along the way? Like, does that visually stop you a little bit along the way? Or does his writing style just naturally allow, because there's no quotation marks, that more fluid conversation, you know, like because it is kind of just this like, you know, you think about the way that we talk, like we're not thinking about like, well, my sentence has ended, let me put quotations on the tail end of it. We're just having a conversation, right? Mm-hmm. So, and people jump in all over the place, and you know, in a way we read, where we actually speak in the way that he writes, almost like a paragraph, like this like long, you know, intermixed type conversation. So I totally reading way too deep into this, but I did have like, I actually noticed that, and I thought about that from my perspective of like, I'm in the marketing world, and that's like a, you know, an adism, I guess, that I had been kind of drawn to in the past. So
you know, that's a really good, it's a really good thought. I didn't have the advertising context for that, but it's definitely not an accident that he chooses to eschew punctuation like that. And I think you're absolutely right. It creates a tension that never quite releases, because like, especially with this narrative, it's kind of a propulsive narrative. It doesn't have a lot of downtime in a way. Like, you don't get like, there's these little character moments, and there's some interspersed kind of internal monologue stuff, like particularly with the sheriff and stuff. But the narrative itself is so propulsive and is always moving towards something that, like, just the intensity of the characters that you're following, the way the dialogue is written, and really everything is written, really feeds into that. So I think you're absolutely right, and he definitely did that on purpose, like that, and that might have been exactly why he did it too, was just to never quite have a respite from the narrative, you know?
Yeah, that's got to be an editor's nightmare. You know, just absolute nightmare to edit, but joy to read for us. Thank goodness.
Yeah, well, let's put a pin on that particular question to ask. I don't want to do any spoiling, but we will be talking with an author who has been edited by Cormac McCarthy's editor, and that will be a question that would be really great to talk to him about. So he might have a little bit of insight.
We're gonna get to the bottom of that.
Yeah.
One thing I realized we didn't do is a synopsis, which I'm happy to do here. So it's a pretty simple one, right? This is a game kind of cat and mouse to a degree. You know, Llewellyn Moss, referred to throughout the book as Moss, as most characters are by their last name, who's a West Texas welder on a hunting trip, finds himself essentially with a sack full of cash after a drug deal or drug transportation deal gone bad, and then ends up on the run from a variety of characters, both like law enforcement, Anton Chigurh, as we mentioned, Mexican cartel, who's looking for their $2 million in cash that he stole, and kind of his story of survival to some degree at some point, and the eventual and inevitable end that I think we all kind of saw coming for this character. So it's actually really quite a simple plot, but the amount of dread in this book, and again, and I talk about Anton Chigurh, like the opening scene, first couple pages, sitting in that police station, and man, that sheriff did not know, or that deputy did not know what was coming to him. And what you later learn, and I think which is amazing, is Chigurh decided to get arrested to see if he could escape. And like when you learn that fact, and then you think about the beginning of the novel, you're like, what a monster! What an absolute monster! You know.
Yeah, that scene is particularly effective, and I think as we go, we'll kind of juxtapose the the Coen brothers film adaptation with the novel, just to keep the conversation going around both topics, because I think the film and the book, they don't deviate very much. There are some differences that we'll talk about, but that scene in particular in the film is so faithfully rendered. And you see this in the Coen brothers film a bunch. Is I sat down with the novel and the film on at the same time, and there's literally like lines of dialogue that are just word for word. Like a lot of the dialogue is just straight out of the book because it's just perfect anyway. But that scene in particular is just exactly how you read it on the page and you imagine it is exactly what it looks like on screen. It's so good.
Yeah.
So menacing, and particularly like you mentioned when you realize that he basically just wanted to see if he could escape. He's just this embodiment of chaos, really. Like, we can talk more about like the symbolism of what all these people kind of symbolize, if anything, and we can talk about too like why I thought this book kind of slotted in nicely to some of the topics that we've covered in previous episodes, in even the last episode too. Jensen, let me get just give me your impressions of that opening sequence, through kind of him discovering the money and going back to bring water to the dying cartel guy in the truck and that kind of stuff.
Man, I don't like that. Like, we've already really said everything that I think can be said about that opening scene. It is I would say, chilling to an extent. And then watching or reading through like Llewellyn, like I actually watched the film today. Since I had finished the book, I wanted to go back and see how faithful the film really was. And there's always that discussion about, is this an example of when the film's better than the book? I think it's impossible to say. They're both really good. I couldn't say one is actually better than the other. But it's interesting that's like following Llewellyn after he's like out hunting and he stumbles upon a botched drug deal. And I just can't imagine like what would go through someone's head to like continue down that path that he took. Like, he sees from his binoculars, like a corral of like 4x4 trucks and SUVs and dead bodies on the ground. And maybe it's, him being a Vietnam vet and not as shaken by that. But I feel like if I saw just a bunch of dead bodies on the ground surrounded by like 5 trucks, my instinct wouldn't be like, oh, I'm gonna go check this out. I'd be out of there.
Yeah, I'm calling the police.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah. But he goes and he explores. And then not only that, like his like hunting acumen and his experience in the army leads him to like look around and be like, okay, where's the last man standing? What happened to him? And tracks where this guy went to and finds him. And it's just that fun. I don't know. It's just weird. Like he like at those 2 places that he visits, going to the botch deal and then also finding the last guy. And like stealing guns and then finding a satchel full of cash. This is one thing that always bothered me. Like whenever I watched the film when it came out, when I've read the book, and then watching the film again today, like we all know, like, because if you haven't read the book or watched the film and you're listening to this podcast or watching this podcast, like, why are you here? Go and at least watch the film and then come back. But like, there's a transponder in, like, you know, if you like, you find out later if it's your first time, but if you are if you know the plot, you know there's a transponder in the satchel of cash. Like, why does he like keep the money in the satchel? Like, the first thing I would do if I came upon that money would be to dump it out and count it. And like, I would have definitely found that transponder, but he's like, no, I'm just gonna, take it home. And it's just this strange thing where like he's doing something I couldn't conceive of actually doing, and then making decisions that seem innocuous to him, by like just leaving the money in the satchel and not like rifling through this thing. I guess it's, it's set in 1980. Like, you're not thinking about transponders, but we are now in 2026. And then he goes and he hides it under his trailer. And one of my favorite scenes of an interaction with a couple is whenever he gets home and his wife Carla Jean starts questioning him.
What's in the bag?
Full of money. Where'd you get that gun from? The getting place. What'd you give for it? I didn't give nothing for it. I found it.
It's great. It's so good.
So that line, like, she keeps asking him questions, and he's like, "Keep on. I'm gonna take you in the back and screw you." Yeah.
And that scene is pretty much word for word in the movie.
Yeah, it is. It is.
I tried that line on my wife once, and
how'd that go? Not good. Yeah. Report back with your field research.
Mission failed. Yeah. Jensen, you forgot a bag of cash. That would have changed things.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is the necessary ingredient to that interaction unfolding the correct way is to come home with $2 million. Jensen, you hit on a really interesting point that I want to drill down on a little bit, because as you said it occurred to me that the themes that McCarthy is kind of getting at in this novel are evident even from that early, where he discovers the money. And you said, well, the first thing that I would do is pull all the money out and at least count it, and then probably discover that there's a technological device buried in it. And it's like, yeah, that is what you would do because you're a modern person. And that's kind of the tension here, is a lot of these characters are being thrust into the modern world with an old world conception. So they're trying to live by these old rules. For instance, Llewellyn goes back. It kind of starts this whole mess by going back to the scene of the crime, because in that initial scene, he discovers that one of the men that was involved in this drug deal gone wrong is still alive. And I think he's gut shot. He's bleeding out. And he just keeps saying, agua, please get me water. And he feels bad about it. So he goes back that night with water to try to find this guy. And of course, the guy has died at that point. But that is kind of an example of this almost old world honor, this idea of like, I'm going to, I have a guiding principle, and Anton Chigurh, the villain, kind of represents everything that is opposed to that, like the chaos of the actual world and the budding up of the old world and the new world colliding in a violent way. And I think you're exactly right. And that's why that scene sticks out, is because most people would read it the same way and go, well, yeah, like, of course the money's being tracked. And it's like, well, not to these people. Like, they're from the before times where
It's funny you say that.
there was honor among thieves, you know?
Yeah, there's an interesting conversation with Sheriff Bell and a sheriff of another county because as Llewellyn is trying to run, Anton is following him and leaving bodies in his wake, and these two sheriffs are sitting down at a diner talking, and they're talking like there's this thing that actually comes up a couple different times, but there's this one scene that I remember. They're talking about the old days and what things were like, and I think earlier in the book before this scene happens, I think like one the first monologue that we see at the beginning of a chapter is Sheriff Bell saying that back in the day there were sheriffs that didn't even carry guns, and then like you're sitting down and the sheriff says it's all out war, and like what are you supposed to do to defend against these people? And then he makes a thing saying like, and you got all these people walking around with green hair and bones in their noses. Like, what are you supposed to do with that?
Yeah, and for a lot of these people, as you find out, Llewellyn, of course, is a Vietnam veteran, and Sheriff Bell is a World War II veteran, and it's interesting because like why those two wars are mentioned and like what they could potentially represent is, you know, the Vietnam War is the last war in American history with a draft. So you have people going to fight that may not have been fully bought in on the vision or even known what a potential vision for a just war or whatever could be. So there's a lot of kind of tension there with how do you reckon with the things that you've done in a war that you didn't understand and you didn't want to be at in the first place. And World War II is similar in that there was a draft, but the I think the way in particularly later on, the way in which we kind of conceive of that war is of being very much a war of good and evil. It's more black and white the way that we think about it, and you know maybe some of that's mythologized or whatever, but that's what this book is kind of about: is the mythologies of the old and the new world kind of butting up, and in a real way, both of these people that fought these wars, one thing that they would have had in common was that we're fighting these wars there so that we don't have to fight them here. Well, now they've woken up in a world where we're fighting the war here. And it's not the same war, but it's a war. And that's why it's interesting that Sheriff Bell says it's all out war out there. Because it is. Everybody, you know, Llewellyn finds, you know, fully automatic weapons, you know, things that like are weapons of war, not things that civilians could buy in the United States even at that time in the 80s, right? So it's in a very real way, the war has come home for these two characters, which I think is also interesting because that kind of gets at their general idea of what it was like to be someone in a war. So yeah, good observation. It's cool.
Will?
I think, yeah. I mean, to your point, Taylor, you know, this is a clash of order, essentially, right? Like it's order of the old world, order of the new world. Bell trying to make sense of who am I and, you know, have I achieved what I think I wanted to achieve, you know, in my life? His own meaning, right? I think he kind of like, and I love the way that Cormac McCarthy writes and intersperses his like personal narrative throughout, you know, each chapter, every other chapter or something like that. I think it is really interesting in telling that story, kind of that parallel story, because you jump into the book immediately thinking like Llewellyn Moss is the main protagonist and you're going to see his story through the end. And, you know, he's a very important character, but really he's just one of the people, to your point, in this war of order, like in this war of chaos that's kind of coming. And I think like, not to jump too far to the end, but like Anton Chigurh represents that just impending nature of doom, and there's no stopping it. Like there's no stopping it. No matter what, things are going to change. And this is the change that is coming that you have to address at some point.
Yeah.
And like in his character, in his own, coin flip, that whole kind of like philosophical, him as a person, tries to basically say like, this is happening. This is just the way it is. I have no control over this. Like, this is just what must occur. And for the rest of the people responding to that, they're getting hit by a train. They're suddenly thrown into this war that they didn't know exist. I mean, literally, if Anton Chigurh shows up at your front doorstep, a coin's about to flip and is going to decide whether you live or you die. And I think that is what, for me, was one of the most like intense parts of this whole narrative was, and Carson Wells makes this statement, like, he's just going to keep coming. He doesn't care. Like, it's just going to keep coming. That sense of tension and dread made this book impossible to stop reading. For me, like, it was just constant pressure every single time. And even when Llewellyn Moss had some semblance of success, it wasn't enough. You knew there was something else happening, in parallel. And like when he would call, when Carson Wells gave Llewellyn Moss that number, and he gives him a call, and Anton Chigurh picks up, like, just like all these pieces that were happening, outside of what Llewellyn Moss thought was occurring. And then suddenly, all right, here's fate at your doorstep once again. And you thought you had some control and you don't. There's just these scenes that constantly play that into motion. And it was just unbelievably dreadful. And, for all the characters involved and for the reader, the tension was insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's all great points. I want to circle back just a little bit to underscore something else that kind of gets at what you were talking about in this kind of idea of like this almost cold, uncaring march forward of the inevitability of death, whatever, is in that early scene after Chigurh escapes from the deputy in the police station. The first thing that he does is he carjacks a guy, and he's impersonating a cop. He drives off in a cop car. He pulls this guy over with the intention of taking his car, and that scene is really chilling because he drags along this I guess like a CO2 tank and a bolt gun, which is usually I think used to put down cattle. And basically, you put it up to something's head, and it fires a bolt real quick that just kind of severs the brain and kills something very quickly and surgically and clinically. And he uses this weapon, this method of, butchering in a very literal sense on a human several times. And that just underscores, like, it's not rage that drives this person. It's not how we understand our like in our conception of like what an evil, sadistic type of person does. This is a clinical, cold type of death. And to me, that's kind of how he manifests throughout the story, is like this impending shadow of inevitability. And in a real sense, when he's doing the coin flip and he asks, for instance, the guy at the gas station to call it, call the flip to determine, it's like he doesn't want to have. It's not up to him in any real way. He's like, the universe decides, and I'm just carrying out the universe's will in a way, and I am just pure will, and it's dark, and it's a lot harder to grapple with that than your tip, like a Jack the Ripper, like a sadistic serial killer that gets off on stalking and butchering people in a very torturous, disgusting type of way. He doesn't seem to get any pleasure out of any of this stuff. It's just cold, calculated inevitability, you know.
This is actually a good example of what I think what Cormac does really well in the book that you miss out on if you only watch the film. Like in the scene where Chigurh pulls over the guy on the side of the road to like steal his car. In the movie, he gets the guy to get out of the car and he's like, hold still, and kills him. But in the book, he's like, hey, step back to the back of the car. Step back a little bit further. Come here, come a little closer. And then he bolts the guy, and the body drops. And then Anton Chigurh says, I didn't want you to get blood on the car. And then gets in the car and drives off. Like, it's so sinister and so calculating because he's stealing a car. He's going to be driving a stolen car. There's a dead body on the side of the road. And he knows if he's driving around in this car, if there's blood splatter on it, then he's going to stand out more. And that's going to give him less time to steal another car and move on. It's so chilling.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a different type of sinister than something that is easier to explain, I think. You know, I think that's what makes it even more chilling is he's hard to pin down, you know.
Well, one thing too, just to kind of highlight that as well, is it's not only what he does and the rule of law basically in the universe that as he sees it, like the inevitability, but it's also what happens to him. Like when he gets shot and he's in the bathroom treating his wounds, he doesn't react. He almost the way Cormac McCarthy wrote it is he was almost unaffected by
no anger really. Like yeah.
It was just complete, like, I don't know what the right word is, but like, just he was even keel, and just accepted the fact and dealt with the pain in a way that had no reaction, and made it far more terrifying as a person because there's the total lack of real human response to getting shot and trying to pull buckshot out of your, I think it was his thigh or his leg or something, it's just unreal.
I mean, you're dealing with someone that it's hard to even say that they're human.
Right.
And
they're not really. They represent something different.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe that was Nietzsche's Übermensch.
That is potentially one way to look at it. Although I think while he does kind of represent like, a might makes right almost, but he doesn't really, his moral system for what little of it we see is it's not really like a type of ethics, really. It's more so just like accepting that the universe has some form of inevitability. And what I'm doing is I'm more so just the intermediary of what is already to occur. Like it's less like a moral system and more like
determinism,
pure nature determined. Yeah, it's really it's difficult to understand because with some of the other stuff that we've read characters who do monstrous things based on potentially a misunderstanding of moral order or an inverted sense of a moral order. In a way, like when we read The Stranger, Merceau, he reacts out of an idea that the universe has no intrinsic order at all. Therefore, it doesn't really matter what I do in a way. And Chigurh could almost look like that, but it almost looks like to me that Chigurh thinks that the universe has an order. It's just not one that we would think of as being moral in our conception. It's just almost randomness in a way. It doesn't care. It's
I'd
very
actually hold on.
almost pure nihilism in a way, but
I don't even
you
know.
can't even put nihilism on it because it doesn't have a structure.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason why I said determinism earlier is there are at least 2 points in the book where he's talking to someone and he says, this was inevitable. How could anything in your life have
Anything else happen?
led you to here? He says it to Wells. And
yeah,
then
I think
he
he says like every decision you've ever made has led to this.
Yeah. And he says basically the same thing to Carla Jean at the very end. That it was like, predetermined. Everything that's happened has led to this situation.
Yeah, but in that way too, it's sort of an inversion of, not exactly an inversion, like it's not exactly an upside down version, but like how we understand like a more of a moral determinism is like, if you behave, in more good ways than bad ways, you're still gonna die, but like at the end of your life, there may be more of a moral what's the word, like I can't even it's like almost being let down a little bit easier, because at least the totality of your actions could be determined to be somewhat meaningful. Chigurh is almost like, it doesn't matter how much good or bad you've done, this is what's coming. Like,
Yeah.
and it has no meaning. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have any more. But now, of course, he thinks that other characters in the book are very much opposed and argue with him about this conception of the fabric of reality. But it's very difficult to explain him, as he's almost like, to me, it's like this primordial chaos, like the chaos that existed before the creation of the world. Like if you read like the old Gnostics and stuff, like the demiurge is like this like chaotic ooze from the before order was created, and all this like that's almost more of what it feels like, is this Gnostic tradition, rather than like how we understand morality maybe in the Western world, from more of like a Christian ethic of like there being good and bad. Like it's just it's really, I can't quite wrap my head around it. Like I'm just trying to I'm kind of going at it as it comes to me right now,
Yeah. I remember barely passing a college intro to philosophy course and learning about determinism and like the like causal chain, and then like using that for like the explanation for God is the first mover or whatever. But like, and so the reason why I'm saying it's some form of determinism is that Chigurh sees life as this causal chain, and he's not even making the claim that he is a mover. He is the movement.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The
universe is the mover. Yeah. This is the truth of the universe, and I'm just the emissary.
Yeah. I don't know. That's like, I think that's why he's such a fantastic and terrifying villain in a story, because it does feel devoid of ethic or some sort of guiding philosophy. And like, he can't be reasoned with. He can't be stopped. He is inhuman. It is terrifying.
It's also really funny in the way that he, at the end of the book, after the car crash, he barters with the kids for his shirt. He just like, I find that like a very interesting turn of like, it's not that anything has changed. It's more so that because like in a way that interaction with the kids is like, it's almost soft. All right. It's like, he's in a terrible situation, but he's meeting the kids like, oh yeah, give me,
Well, that's interesting though, because maybe that works with his overarching, I hesitate to call it an ethic, but his overarching worldview. The children haven't had enough causal chains yet to lead anywhere, and so he gives them more will. Like, they still have decisions to make because they haven't made it to the end of their road yet. So, like, I wonder if that's kind of what that, like, they're literally bargaining with with death, in a way.
Yeah.
Like, those are the children's first steps of bargaining with inevitability. The adults in the story don't get that opportunity because they've been bargaining their entire life. Like, that's a very interesting that you brought that up, because I had not thought about that, but that's really interesting.
Yeah. It's that scene plays out in my head a lot because it's toward the tail end of the book, but it's also just very, like, interesting in the way that he interacts with the kids in that way, when, to your point, the rest of the adults were treated in such a more maybe callous or calculated way.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of okay, well, how do you want to react in this situation? He's a little bit more open to your point.
You still have some choices you get to make. You haven't quite made it to the culminating part of your life yet. That's really great.
Which is also a little bit interesting when you think about the age of Carla Jean, because she's not that old, but she's older than, she's an adult. She's what, 19?
19, I think, yeah.
So at that point, I guess that turn, he's assumed she's accepted her own fate.
Just old enough to be considered culpable for her life,
Well, that, and, like, he blames Llewellyn for her death, because
true.
He gave Llewellyn the option. He said, "Come here and you can save your wife. I can't say the same for you because you can't. You're dead. But if you come and accept your fate, then I'll spare your wife." Another difference between the film and the book that I thought you lose a little is whenever Llewellyn is on his way to El Paso to meet up with his wife to try to escape, he picks up a hitchhiker, and then they, like, stay in a hotel.
Girl.
Yeah. And those interactions and the way that comes to a head adds some color to the ending, which we also in the film, you don't see the entirety of Sheriff Bell's interactions with Carla Jean. Whenever he goes there the first time, like, she comes to the door and he takes off his hat and she starts crying, because that's usually the sign of being like, "Hey, sorry, but your spouse is dead." He's like, "Oh, no, he's sorry. He's not dead yet. I just want to talk." And then when he does see her again and he has to take his hat off, not only is she dead, there's a teenage girl with him, and it makes it look like he was cheating on her with some young trollop.
Right. Which is interesting, because not only does in the book, and also the film version, not only does Llewellyn lose his life, but he loses his legacy too in the eyes of the people, because it's misreported in the papers. And this is like what you mentioned. You lose this in the film because they cut a little bit of this out for time. But I think in the movie you only see scant, like, interaction, and then you see a woman floating face down in the pool in the film. But in the book, you get, this kind of hitchhiking scene and him trying to help her kind of escape her bad situation at the same time, which is just kind of another example of, like, his desire to do the right thing, quote unquote. I'm doing scare quotes on the camera for you listening on the audio version. Like I mentioned, going back to bring the water to the cartel guy that was dying is, quote unquote, doing the right thing. Helping this teenage hitchhiker is doing the right thing. But all that ever does in this universe is bring harm to those people that are caught in his wake, and it's interesting because this girl ends up being killed in the onslaught, and it looks to everyone who just comes upon the scene that he was in a hotel room with a underage girl. And in the book, the sheriff says in his internal monologue that, I wanted to tell Carla Jean that it wasn't what they were saying in the papers. That wasn't what happened. He picked up a hitchhiker. He was trying to do the right thing. But as always, every time he tries to do the right thing, it just makes it worse, And I don't know if that is something that is true in the world, like the world that we all live in and inhabit, the literal universe that we all live in. But in Anton Chigurh's world, that is, that is just another sign of weakness. It's just another thing that stops you from escaping. It's just it has no moral value, really. Mm-hmm. It just impedes him from escaping, really.
Right. Like Llewellyn sort of believes in this like presumptive justice, like things will work out, right?
Yeah, if I do the right thing, things are going to work out. If I do
the right thing, yeah, things will work out. As long as I make the right decisions, things we'll see this through. And I feel like he kind of says akin to that. Like he just like trusts his own judgment so much and trusts the situation and, tries to assure Carla Jean that it's all going to be okay. And I think he genuinely believes that, right? But I think the counterpoint to that is just the Anton Chigurh of that wave is probably way bigger than you realize.
And your like small acts of morality aren't going to stack up at the end.
Yeah.
To what this character represents,
Ooh, so I got a question.
Very dark.
So another thing that the film cuts is, you said earlier, Sheriff Bell fought in World War II, and he earned a Bronze Star. Do y'all remember how he earned it?
Yeah, and this is a great time to bring that up. We've covered quite a lot of the plot. There's not a ton of plot that's happening. I mean, Llewellyn is on the run. There's a hitman that comes in at one point. I think Woody Harrelson plays him in the movie. That is going to somehow get involved in this and try to help Llewellyn get out. There's all, but it's really he's running across the desert from motel to motel trying to escape the inevitability of Anton Chigurh. They get into a fight. Chigurh gets shot. He blows up a car in front of a pharmacy so that he can steal a bunch of pharmaceutical supplies, and he, bandages himself up and blah, 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 blah. That's basically all that's happened, in the actual plot, But now getting to what Jensen's talking about is we get these little pieces of like internal monologue from Sheriff Bell that we don't get in the film that I think fill in a little bit of the blanks and help McCarthy's theme come out a little bit brighter too. So now I'll just kick it to Jensen, talk about that particular monologue. Yeah.
So it actually happens over, I think, 2 monologues, or a couple of different scenes. Like he is at home and stumbles upon his Bronze Star, like in a drawer, and he has some shame or something about it and puts it back away because he doesn't like looking at it. And it isn't until he goes and visits his uncle, and he tells him how he actually earned it.
And this is like his deepest, darkest secret, basically, that nobody knows.
Yeah. It's deepest shame is a good way to say it as well. But he is the leader of this platoon. Is it in France?
I believe so.
Yeah. And they're holed up, and it's been raining for weeks.
Yeah, in like a farmhouse or a barn or something.
Yeah. And there are soldiers advancing right outside, and they chuck a bomb at the farmhouse, and everybody kind of explodes out everywhere. And And for a while, he, at least until the sun goes down, he grabs the big machine gun and all the belts of ammunition that he can get to, and lays down suppressing fire. But as soon as it gets dark, he cuts and runs and escapes and leaves his men behind. And that's how he survives. And the rest of them, they didn't get killed. The ones that didn't get killed by the blast, most definitely they were killed by the advancing enemy. And he gets back to base, and the general or whatever says that, or major they're gonna give him a Bronze Star, and he says he doesn't want it, and tells the major why he doesn't want it and what he did. And he said, "Don't you ever tell anybody about that again, because if you do, you and me both are f***ed, essentially. So you just take the Bronze Star and shut up."
Yeah. And I hinted at this a little bit before when I talked about the kind of the theme, what the thematic elements of World War II and Vietnam juxtaposed could potentially mean. And I said this kind of on accident, and then I realized that this might actually be something that McCarthy was getting at, was that some of what we are able to retrospectively see about wars being black and white is somewhat mythologized. This is a exact representation of one man's honorable act being very much mythologized for a propagandistic reason. It's hinted at in the film or in the book, but it kind of gets at an underlying tension of like, how does somebody that comes from the old world, who knows fundamentally that part of that old world is not real, his heroism in a very real sense is made up, it's fake in a way. Now you could still say, I mean, we might be able to look at that and be like, well, anybody would have done that. I mean, you laid down suppressing fire, you did your best, but like nobody expected you to, stay there with a bunch of corpses and die, right? But like I think it says in the book, like he didn't really know if everybody was dead or not,
Yeah.
So he is, while being a representation of the, if you want to call it like the honor culture of the old world, being conflicted with the world that Anton Chigurh represents. If he's the emissary of the old world, but he knows part of that is total mythology, but it's certainly better than the world that Anton Chigurh represents. How do you fight for the old world when you know it's not real? Like, parts of it could be real, like this is kind of part of the philosophical tension in this book, is like, at one point you could almost think about it as like, if you wanted to take out all of the moral valence and like the monstrosity of all this death and all that stuff, you could think about it as like nostalgia versus progress in a way. We think about, one of the aspects of nostalgia is that, this idea of rose-colored glasses. You're looking, you only remember probably the happiest or the best parts of being a teenager or the old world. Like we interact with this sort of tension all the time, because we've joked about this before, is like we're millennials, so we had entire lives before the digital world really came to be. We've joked about, we may have even talked about this on the podcast before, but like when we were in bands together, like we did small tours across the country before we had smartphones. We would print out MapQuest directions to drive to Illinois to find a place to play. That was a representation of the old world, and we can look back fondly on that and be like, weren't things so much better? And it's like, in certain ways, maybe they were, but some of that is mythologized, right? Like, do we honestly want to go back to not having a GPS in our pocket? Like, I romanticize not being able to know exactly where I was going all the time, but was that actually better? That's a very anodyne way of illustrating the point that I think is kind of coming across here for me, is like, they're probably like, if you just look at it on its face, the world that Sheriff Bell represents is a culture of honor that, went over to Europe to fight the fascists, to take down Adolf Hitler, and to, in the Pacific Theater to win against the Japanese who had preemptively attacked us. And there was this rallying of like of democracy versus authoritarianism. It was very easy to delineate the sides in this sort of a war. And in Vietnam, that veil became a little bit less easy to delineate because of the way that media was proliferating. You still had, in an essence, a democracy fighting an authoritarian regime, but you also had a media that was able to document what was happening on the ground and create dissident factions within the United States that didn't proliferate as easily back in World War II. Like we talked about this during Mother Night, is like the American Nazis that were allied with the actual Nazi party in Germany, they were fringe because it wasn't as easy to proliferate that message. So that idea of dissidence wasn't quite as palpable. So I think it's very interesting that he uses those two characters to represent two different wars, to represent two different timelines of the universe progressing into this direction that eventually leads to someone like Anton Chigurh. I'm kind of ranting about it because it's all sort of flooding to me at once as I kind of talk about it, but that seems to be very much intentional on the part of the author. What do you guys think about that?
Well, before I react too much, I do feel like this is a good spot for you to talk a little bit about the dream that he had, that second dream with his dad, because I think that is a really good illustration of essentially that point, right? Like what's waiting for him, good now.
Point. Okay, so there's two dreams that the sheriff has, and he recounts in two different passages. I'll just give a very, very quick line synopsis of what these dreams are and what I think they represent. The first dream, he's a child and his father has given him some money in town and he loses the money. To me, that represents the passing on. You could think about it as, being given your inheritance, like literally inheriting a culture and losing it, which I think is what Cormac McCarthy is kind of getting at. Is he's been given something that was built through a different generation, and the moment that he gets it, it's gone. And then in the second dream, he dreams that he sees his father. I think they're riding horseback, and his father is carrying a horn that you would build the embers of a fire in, so that you could carry these embers to the next place that you would camp, so that you could start a fire at the next place that you end up at. So his father is literally carrying the fire. This is an image that McCarthy seems more or less obsessed with, particularly in his following book, In the Road. And any of you guys that have read that will obviously see that parallel. I don't want to talk too much about it because I do think that we'll read that as a group and go over it. But this idea of carrying the fire, which is continuing the legacy, is a really easy way to put that. So you have these two dreams that are kind of juxtaposed in a way where he sees his father carrying the fire, literally, of the old world, perhaps, of the way things were, tradition, however you might want to think about that. And then this first dream of him inheriting and then losing it. That's kind of the central tension. It's particularly for that character. Now, Llewellyn is caught in the middle of all of this change because in a very, like I already kind of mentioned with the way that these two wars symbolize one another, at least in my mind. I don't know if this is the definitive academic reading of the novel. This is just what occurs to me. He's caught in the middle of these two worlds in a way. And so it's kind of inevitable that he ends the way that he does, because Sheriff Moss almost has seen himself as the inheritor of the old world and has squandered it. This is why Jensen mentioned earlier, the sheriff opines on, what do I do with these people with green hair and bones in their noses? You know, he's woken up in a world that he no longer recognizes and doesn't know how to interact in. It's a completely different world than the one that he feels he inherited. That, to me, is one of the big symbols kind of at play in this novel. And one of the things that I think you lose in the film, not that the film's bad, I think the film is one of the best movies of that decade, bar none. It's incredible, but they couldn't include every single thematic element of the novel, obviously. But I do feel that that is a really important image that helps us kind of distill a little bit more of what McCarthy was doing, particularly as it pertains to his later work, Into the Road, which is an idea that he's very much seems obsessed with, not the least to do with the fact that he, is dealing with fatherhood a little bit later in life than a lot of people are, which kind of makes a lot of sense when you put all this together. So let me get y'all's reactions and I'll quit ranting, but that's my initial read anyways.
Yeah, I mean, it's spot on, honestly. The fact of the matter is, I mean, all these characters are coming up to a head where they have to face their own, essentially, they have to face their own morality, and whether or not they're able to carry the torch, in the face of the things that are happening to them and around them, or does that change actually the world that they see, and what they actually think the world is all about. That is one of the, I think, one of the more devastating things about Llewellyn is his acceptance, and sort of as Chigurh gets closer, and as he gets more wounded, and he feels just the gravity of fate falling around him, is his loss of. It's not that necessarily he lost his optimism, but I think he just begins to. Yeah. He just knows that, like, I am, and I think that phone call with Chigurh is really the moment where he thought, okay, I might have an out, or maybe this is my opportunity to kind of reclaim a little bit of a step, and then in the most literal sense, death answers the call. He thought that this was going to be a phone call that would save him, or this was the way out, and it wasn't even. He didn't even have the opportunity, because death answered, and this was the new reality. And that, to me, I think, is, to your point, to illustrate that point even further, is just that, like, all these characters eventually have to realize that things are, to a degree, not what they thought, and they have to accept it, and it's devastating. And I think for anyone who goes through those experiences, I mean, I think about, like, you mentioned nostalgia and us playing as a band, right? I think when we all were in our early years, you think, oh man, all right, you play, you start a band, you play for a few years, you find a manager, you hit the road, and success is right there around the corner, and then life comes at you pretty hard. You go to college and you make other decisions, and the reality of getting a job and having to take care of yourself, and you're like, oh, how do I weigh that with my dreams and everything? Life has a lot of gravity, and life keeps moving. You keep getting older, and so you have to start making decisions. It's just a really, like, telling novel about kind of the acceptance of your own fate, and
that's a way to look at it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
At least how I saw it. Right. So, Jensen, what about you?
Something like you had said, like, early on in the episode, that Chigurh represents, like, this new world, this kind of new order, and Sheriff Bell is from the old world, and the entire show, like I've been thinking about, well, Llewellyn is that transition link. He is caught between, then you literally said it later, that he is between the old world and the new world, and there's this tension pulling at him from both sides. And I wonder if we are meant to feel like we are Llewellyn, living in the tension of this new order and the old ways, or if we should be looking at this fully backward and saying he's just a tragedy of the transition and the new way of the world is upon us.
I like that analysis. It also occurs to me, I wonder if, and I don't know this for a fact at all, I'm just speculating. Like, I wonder if Cormac McCarthy also might have been trying to say that the Vietnam generation literally was the generation that dropped the ball. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean like Llewellyn represents that generation in the story. And as you just mentioned, is the transition point between the old world conception, the World War II black and white world, and this whatever inevitability of just absolute chaos is. Do you think that maybe the tension of McCarthy's theme here is that Llewellyn could have made other decisions that could have maybe stopped the tide of that inevitability? Like, you could, if you wanted to analyze it, like right down to like the very basic point, none of this happens if Llewellyn doesn't take the money, right?
I think none of this happens to Llewellyn if he doesn't take the money. But
right,
that drug deal already went south, and there's already, yeah.
But that was kind of all happening at the
um,
periphery, like in a way, like it wasn't real yet for these people. Maybe it would become real. Maybe that's part of it, is that this is coming here whether you like it or not, you know.
And I think that's the case. Like, hold on. Before Llewellyn takes the money, Anton Chigurh is already getting himself arrested to test himself to get out of the situation, and strangles the sheriff's deputy to death. Before Llewellyn takes the money, there is a splotch of dirt soaked through with cartel blood because a drug deal has gone south. Chigurh already is operating in the world. This drug deal has already gone south. There are wealthy businessmen in skyscrapers involved in making deals and doing under the table dealings, and are involved in the cartel and trafficking drugs. We have a scene in the book where the sheriff is reading a news story where this couple would go and move in with old people, torture and then kill them, and then collect their Social Security checks. And they had been doing it for years. And there's kind of this like funny moment where the reason why they got caught is because one of the guy is seen outside wearing nothing but a dog collar, and the deputy tells the deputy that, and the deputy laughs and then feels bad, and Bell says, "Don't worry about it. I have to laugh sometimes too." But it's wild that it took somebody wearing a dog collar to get noticed, not digging a grave and throwing old people's dead bodies into it. So like the world, the new order is here. And it, like, Llewellyn didn't usher it in. He is just caught in between. Because I don't know, I think there's some aspect of the new world with him going down, and instead of calling the cops and like trying to render aid to the dying cartel member, he takes his Uzi and then goes and finds the guy with the sack of money, and takes his 45 and the sack of $2 million and goes home. But then on the other hand, he does still have some of that old world honor where he goes and takes water to the man. He picks up the runaway.
No, you're exactly right. He's a synthesis of the two, really, because he acts in ways that are representative of both of those moral orders. So yeah, no, you're totally right. I mean, he's literally the middle point of the transition. Yeah, that's interesting. Man, Cormac McCarthy could write, man.
Yeah.
For real. And again, I go back to the fact that like so much of this book is just dialogue. Like he doesn't have to over explain what the point of what he's trying to say. He's just having two people talk about the world around them. And like that is what's so incredible about him as a writer is he's able to create so many paths for us to try to determine, what's happening in this universe that he's created. And it's literally by people discussing it. It's incredible.
Yeah, I want to. We've pretty much covered the plot up until this point and hinted at what kind of happens. Obviously, Llewellyn's fool's errand ends in his demise, as is inevitable. His wife is killed in a very affecting scene where she tries to bargain with Anton Chigurh. One thing that I wanted to look at, though, that I really like, and this is done in both the film and in the book, is we've kind of talked about how Chigurh represents this almost not exactly random, but this chaotic element of the universe that he seems to almost think that he's inhabiting, like he's almost giving justice in a way. But what happens, like after he kills Moss's wife, is he's hit by a car. You remember this scene? Mm-hmm. Like I didn't think a lot about this, but there's no reason to put that scene in the book unless it's for a reason. And I want to see what you guys think about this. But to me, that almost represents that, like, we've transitioned from World War II generation into Vietnam generation into this post whatever world of Anton Chigurh. And then Anton Chigurh gets hit by a car. Now he doesn't die. He limps off. But like that same randomness totally finds him too. So like, is Cormac McCarthy talking about that maybe like there's even more coming, like that there's even another version of whatever these worlds that we've been talking about are coming to a head? Or is it that even the emissary of the universe's just cold, calculated inevitability is still subject to those same laws? Like, what did you guys think about that scene? Like, that just struck me as important.
Isn't it the car that hits him? Isn't it like a couple boys who were like were they high? I think. Did they steal a car and were they high? I'm trying to remember who hit him.
That seems to ring a bell.
Yeah, if I recall correctly, which is interesting because if that is the case, and I should probably go back and read this, they're younger than Anton, so it does imply this next generation. And then also to your point, it's like a different style of chaos. Like it's like, Anton is this like primordial, like dark kind of ancient chaos, and they represent almost this more just like, just pure, youthful chaos. Yeah, I'm trying to think about how I have like lawful good and like lawful evil. Like where do these players fit on that matrix? Is what I'm trying to determine in my head right now. But like in a way, it's like
the chaotic neutral.
Yeah, the chaotic neutral, right? Like there's just there, it doesn't matter what version of your chaos you think. There is another version that can create its own chaos in your life and change your own course.
Right, and that form of
It's
chaos
inevitable.
too would be, yeah, that form of chaos would also be characterized by having no will whatsoever, really, because if you think about it, like they didn't intend to hit anybody with their car as an accident. So
Right.
like Chigurh's chaos has a will behind it. It's very much like directed and purposeful in a way. But like this form of chaos is pure chaos. Like it has no
Yeah.
will. It just is. It's the actual randomness of the universe and not what Chigurh thinks it is, which is this like directed inevitability of like yeah, those are two different sides of the coin, maybe you could say, if you want to go right for the metaphor, That's
Yeah.
very interesting. Good analysis there, Will.
Yeah, I pulled or fuck. I immediately thought whenever you brought this up was everything you have done in your life has led you to this moment. Was like like bringing that full circle, but also like I don't view it as any kind of poetic justice. I agree. I think it is.
No, it's not poetic, right?
Just yeah, it's not even justice. It just happened.
Is.
It just is.
Yeah, I was about to say it's right there, Jetson. It was right
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Let's run that back.
Man.
Let's do an edit. Well, guys, we've been talking for a bit, and I am excited to talk about what we're going to read next. So, well, Taylor, what are we reading next for the listeners?
So I'm excited. So far, the No Country for Old Men was the newest book that we've written or read. I wish I'd written it, but we read. But I'm gonna actually get really recent with this one, which I'm excited to do. This was a book, a novel that was released in January of 2025. So it's very new in the world of literature. The paperback edition is going to be released here in a couple of weeks, February 24th. And it is a novel by Adam Ross, who is a Nashville author named Playworld. I read this novel a while ago. I loved it. I've subsequently, even before I'd read all of Adam's work. He's really, really brilliant. A great writer, thinker, interesting guy. I think you guys will really enjoy this novel. It takes place mostly in the 80s in New York. It follows a semi-autobiographical story of Adam's life growing up as a child actor in New York, and it's kind of about the way in which children can be foisted into the adult world without the proper tools to manage it and what that can do. It has a lot to say about boyhood and manhood and how we interact in the world and the life of an artist. And I think it really captures also a moment in time of New York in the 80s of a world that we aren't as familiar with now, is a kind of a free range childhood and some of the pitfalls of that, but some of the benefits of it as well. It's a really great novel. It's funny. It's insightful. It's poignant. I think you guys will really, really enjoy it. I'm excited to share it with you guys. It's been getting rave reviews all year. Pretty much anywhere that you want to read about good novels, you're going to see this in the best books of 2025, which is very deservedly a part of. We're going to start with part 1. This book is in part 1 and part 2. So the next episode will be on part 1. And then we will have the author on to talk about the book as well, which we're very excited to do. This will be the first like author interview that we get to do and like really pick somebody's brain on the writing process and some of the thematic elements of the novel and just kind of get real deep into the book. Super excited to share this novel with you. So go pick up a copy of Playworld by Adam Ross. Like I said, the paperback will be out very soon. And the hardcover is available now. Please grab it. You won't regret it. Can't wait to share it with you. We'll see you guys next time on Shelf Destruct. Thanks for hanging out.
I am really excited. I'm really excited to actually get to do an interview. When we read The Death of Ivan Ilyich, we did try to get Leo Tolstoy, but he couldn't make it because he's been dead for 150 years.
His publicist was hard to reach. We got a Ouija board out, and it was a disaster episode. So.
All right, gentlemen, it's been great. We'll see you both at the next one.
See you soon.